In the city of Riverport, where the urban lights shine as brightly as hidden ambitions, the thick air of political intrigue intertwines with the whisper of the wind in the streets. This place, once a quiet fishing village, has transformed into a hotbed of power and corruption. Towering buildings rise defiantly, while echoes of empty promises resonate on every corner. It is here that the destinies of the elite and the humble intertwine in deeper and more complex ways than one might imagine. Richard, a highly charismatic politician known not only for his eloquence but also for his skill in playing the complicated game of power, was preparing for an event that could change the course of his career. Every word he uttered in public resonated with fervor and undeniable charisma, earning the admiration of both citizens and his feared rivals. However, behind the smiles and applause, Richard felt like a juggler balancing the thin line between loyalty and betrayal. His life was marked by expectations that pushed him toward a series of difficult decisions, all with potentially fatal ramifications. That afternoon, while heading to a crucial rally, a chance encounter changed the direction of his life. Richard's gaze fell upon the figure of Valerie, a young woman who seemed to shine with her own light. The daughter of a local mechanic, Valerie emanated an authenticity that exquisitely contrasted with the superficiality of the political life he knew. Her laughter, unfolding like music in the tension-filled air, captured Richard's attention in a way that no crowd of admirers had ever done before. In her simplicity, Valerie offered him a corner of peace amid the chaos surrounding him. Intrigued, Richard decided to approach her, captivated by the freshness of her spirit. The conversation between them flowed naturally, as if they had known each other all their lives. She spoke to him of her dreams, her childhood antics, and her father's workshop, where life revolved around nuts and engines. As they got to know each other, the barriers separating his world of politics and that of ordinary people began to fade. In these shared moments, Richard not only found a budding love but also a rebirth of himself, one that had been hidden under the pressure of his ambitious political career. However, as in every story where power and desire collide, their romance was not destined to be simple. Complaints and whispers surrounding their relationship began to resonate in the halls of power. Richard's allies were not the type to easily accept his connection with someone they considered inferior. To them, Valerie was a distraction, a source of scandal, a threat that could destabilize the public image they had carefully crafted for their leader. The pressure mounted, and Richard felt the weight of the expectations of those around him, including his voters and donors. Within him, an internal conflict ignited. Should he follow the path that politics had laid out for him, risking his sincere connection with Valerie, or should he rebel against expectations and follow his heart? As his feelings for her grew, Richard realized the true lesson of love that Valerie offered him, the essence of being real, of being human in a world plagued by masks. Both knew that bringing their relationship to light could have devastating consequences. However, their love not only flourished in the shadows, it was nourished by the honesty and vulnerability they shared. Valerie, although aware of the danger, felt that Richard's heart beat to a different rhythm than that of his political colleagues. To her, he was more than a politician, he was a man who struggled with the same humanity as everyone else. In an ironic twist of fate, a scandal began to brew. An ambitious journalist, always in search of the next big story that could catapult him to stardom, lurked around Richard's life and connections. Upon discovering the secret relationship with Valerie, the journalist became intrigued. He considered that such a revelation would not only endanger Richard's impeccable image but also shake the foundations of Riverport's political world like an earthquake. The possibility of immediate and glorious recognition, fueled by the destruction of a reputation, led him to thoroughly investigate his target's life. As the scandal stirred like a hurricane, Richard and Valerie were drawn into a whirlwind of emotions. Their encounters, once full of laughter and hopes, were now marked by the anxiety of uncertainty. Suddenly, Valerie became a symbol of what Richard could lose, and although she felt trapped between love and escape, she refused to yield to social pressure. In his struggle to protect what they had built, Richard had to ask himself whether love could overcome fear and distrust. As the scandal threatened to become a public storm, Richard summoned his closest team. The meeting was tense, filled with harshly accusatory glances and worrisome murmurs. Each team member, fearful of the impact this could have on the campaign, advocated for separating from Valerie, alluding to her social status and how unlikely it was that their love would survive media pressure. However, Richard, feeling more cornered than ever, realized that what was truly at stake was his own essence. On the other hand, Valerie, in the intimacy of her home, felt the weight of the world on her shoulders. Despite her love for Richard filling her with joy, she also understood the magnitude of the sacrifice it might require. One moment, as she watched her father working in the garage, the young woman felt lost between her own dilemmas and desires. Not knowing how to protect Richard and, at the same time, remain true to herself, Valerie began to recognize that her love also had to face the harsh reality of their environment. In these dark hours, the goals of both characters began to converge on a single theme: the search for truth. Richard longed to prove that his connection with Valerie was genuine, while Valerie struggled to demonstrate that the most sincere bonds are determined not by social status but by the heart. An unexpected force began to weave the threads of their love into a plot that could be both their salvation and their downfall. As the scandal intensified, the fate of Richard and Valerie seemed to pendulate delicately between true love and imminent danger. They needed to find the necessary strength to face the adversities that awaited them, and perhaps, in their struggle, they could discover how the passion of a brave heart can challenge even the most twisted currents of ambition. Whether love prevailed or was torn apart by the machinations of power, what remained clear was that Richard and Valerie found themselves at the crossroads between power and passion. In a city steeped in secrets, both would have to determine if they were willing to fight for their love against all odds, in a game where their future, their hearts, and perhaps the very essence of their being were at stake. As tension increased in Riverport, news of Richard and Valerie's clandestine relationship began to capture the attention of the local and national press. The front pages of newspapers were filled with scandalous headlines, capturing a mix of excitement and sensationalism that even the most astute politician could not have foreseen. Anonymous quotes from within the corridors of power intertwined with unfounded rumors, creating a whirlwind of speculations that overwhelmed Richard's mind and kept Valerie in a constant state of anxiety. At the center of this media cyclone was the figure of the young woman, the mechanic at a workshop, whose daily life was a world completely alien to political maneuvers. Valerie, who once felt in harmony with her surroundings, now faced scornful glances and cruel gossip that distorted her image. Feeling trapped between the love blossoming in her heart and the reality of the scandal, her life took a drastic turn. Every time she looked out her home's window, she found herself surrounded by eager journalists, and every sound of car engines in the garage reminded her that there was a world waiting, but also one that threatened to consume everything she had loved. Richard, realizing that Valerie's image was becoming a victim of the same narrative he had so painstakingly built, decided to act. Initially, he tried to keep everything secret, deflecting attention from himself. However, it soon became evident that his initial approach was not enough. They needed to face the situation head-on. The truth had to be their best defense. It was a risky approach because, in the world they navigated, authenticity could be a double-edged sword. But Richard knew he couldn't allow their love to become a scandal or, worse, a tool for discredit. He organized a press conference where he planned to clarify the rumors and make a forceful statement about his relationship with Valerie. The atmosphere in the room was palpable. Several members of the press were preparing to hear what would undoubtedly be a crucial moment. Beside him, Valerie was nervous, hiding the oppressive sensation of being the target of all eyes. Despite her courage in accepting the challenge, the pressure of the event filled her with doubts. As the conference began, Richard felt overwhelmed by the intrusion of cameras and hostile questions launched like arrows. He took a moment to look at the audience, seeking supportive glances among his followers, but what he found was a mixture of expectations, insatiable curiosity, and skepticism. Richard's voice resonated in the room, and, taking a deep breath, he began to talk about his vision for the city and how he had been losing his humanity by letting speculations and anticipations guide him. "I can understand that my relationship with Valerie may seem unusual due to the differences in our lives and circumstances," he said sincerely, the impatience of the listeners palpable in the air. "However, I must say that true love, the one that really matters, is not measured by networks of connections or social positions. It is pure, it is brave, and it deserves to be celebrated rather than despised." The shift in his speech provided a subtle twist. As he described Valerie, his voice softened, allowing genuine passion to slip through like oil. He narrated how he had come to know her not just as the daughter of the local mechanic but as the woman who reminded him what it truly meant to be human, someone who had caused a profound transformation in him. The room filled with murmurs of uncertainty, but Richard took this moment as a respite. He needed not only to heal his image but also to protect Valerie from a world that seemed intent on tearing her apart. Upon concluding the presentation, Valerie felt a surge of emotions, a torrent that shook her, between the fear she felt from the exposure and the love that filled her upon seeing Richard defend her so fully. However, despite the risky act of bravery, both knew that the road ahead would be long and tortuous. From that day on, they were literally the man and the woman to watch, but through their defense, they gained the approval of some while generating the disdain of others who couldn't bear the idea of a politician of his stature being swayed by a love considered vulgar by prevailing social standards. As weeks turned into months, the scandal continued to weigh on both their lives. The pressure exerted by the political community influenced the daily decisions affecting Richard. But the pressure didn't come solely from his colleagues, it also extended to his own heart. The significance of his feelings for Valerie became a constant echo in his mind, simultaneously reminding him of what was at stake and what he stood to lose. Meanwhile, Valerie began to feel more confident in herself, even though the environment continued to harass her. Her union with Richard had shown her that even amid adversity, she could find meaning that went beyond others' perceptions. The relationship fostered a strength in her that made her see clearly that her worth wasn't in the role others assigned her but in love and integrity. However, each step forward was accompanied by a shadow, a persistent reminder that, no matter how much they fought, the scandal that once came to light would always be present as an imminent threat. One day, while they were both at her father's garage, a place that had once been a refuge for Valerie, the atmosphere was filled with anxious glances. The news they received that day came in the form of even more unsettling rumors, a possible attempt to sabotage Richard's career by linking their relationship to delicate events that had taken place in the city. The pressure, hatred, and jealousy of those who had been Richard's companions transformed into actions more aggressive than mere words. Valerie felt overwhelmed and doubtful, facing a difficult decision. The idea of losing Richard because of their love felt suffocating, and the emotional strain began to take its toll. That night, while sharing a dinner in a crowded restaurant, the pressure became unsustainable. The disdainful glances from some diners added an extra weight to their hearts. In the end, Valerie broke down in front of Richard, her voice trembling as she said, "I don't know if we can handle this, Richard. I'm exhausted. Our love has become a battlefield." His response was a silent pact, firmly determined not to let their love stand in the way of his dream. He proclaimed his intention to protect her from all adversity, convincing her that together they could face any storm. However, deep inside, he knew the war was far from over. What Richard couldn't predict was that as his determination increased, so did the anger of those who saw their love as a betrayal of their interests. Conspiracies became increasingly bold, and Richard found himself at the center of a complicated game where every move could lead to his eternal downfall. What he would seek was not only the truth and Valerie's protection but also a home where they could live in peace, away from intrigues. Riverport, as a tense and explosive stage, was about to witness the results of the sacrifices both were willing to make. The winds of change often carry melancholy and great challenge. As the story progressed, Richard and Valerie would discover that the true power of their love lay not only in the union of their hearts but in the strength they found when facing the adversities that threatened to separate them. Their choices and determination, though fragile on their own, would unite with threads of hope on a journey where love would challenge even the darkest shadows. Life went on, but the real conflict was just beginning. While Riverport was reaching a boiling point, with the scandal surrounding Richard and Valerie in full view, the pressures began to take their toll. Richard, though determined to protect his love, was aware that the battle was far from over. Despite his bold speech at the press conference and the awakening of shadows in the city, he knew deep down that every derogatory comment and scathing look from the political elite were constant reminders that they were now in the eye of a hurricane. In her daily life, Valerie began to deal with the weight of contempt emanating from those around her. She had been a free young woman, full of dreams and aspirations, however, becoming the target of cruel gossip had transformed her. Despite Richard's attempts to be her refuge, and the love between them seeming like a beacon in the darkness, social pressure felt overwhelming. People not only belittled their love but also questioned her worth and her place in Richard's world. Every hurtful word she heard reminded her that, despite her deep feelings, not everyone was willing to accept their relationship. One afternoon, Valerie decided to visit her father at the garage, seeking solace in the normalcy that had once been her refuge. It was during that visit that the weight of her situation became intolerable. Her father, a man of great wisdom and nobility, observed the anguish in her eyes. He knew the turmoil his daughter was experiencing due to her relationship with Richard and worried about her well-being. In a heart-to-heart conversation, Valerie confessed everything: the misery of being vilified, the fear of losing Richard, and her own sense of identity. "Your love is a treasure, Valerie," her father said in a soft but firm voice. "But always remember that your worth is not defined through others' eyes. You have to love yourself first." His words resonated in Valerie's heart, providing her with a spark of hope amid the storm. For the first time in weeks, Valerie allowed herself to think that, regardless of what happened with Richard, her life could not depend on others' perceptions. Meanwhile, the political situation was becoming more volatile. Richard decided to convene a meeting of influential allies to discuss his next move. In that meeting, the murmurs were countless. The tensions felt like electricity in the air as political analysts and strategists discussed the repercussions of the scandal, each word filled with fear about the upcoming elections. Although Richard appeared determined, there were increasingly evident divisions among his allies. Many considered his relationship with Valerie an act of madness that risked his career and his position in the party. "Honestly, Richard, you need to reconsider this. People are talking, and their opinion can become a shackle," warned Thomas, one of his closest advisors. The others present nodded, creating a chorus of doubts that pressured Richard. "We cannot allow a scandal of this magnitude to weaken us. The campaign requires unity and focus," added another voice. Facing the challenges ahead, Richard felt as if every argument in favor of sacrificing Valerie turned into a dagger in his heart. However, his father's words resonated in his mind. If he was going to be a good leader, he had to start from a place of truth and genuine love, not from fear of losing a status he wasn't even willing to give up. In a moment of sincerity, Richard raised his voice. "Is that what you want me to do? Abandon the person who truly gives me strength?" The silence that followed was palpable. His allies' gazes had frozen. He felt he had to choose between love and ambition and decided he couldn't abandon her. It was evident in his eyes that the bond he shared with Valerie was more important than any title, more indivisible than any political contract. At the end of the meeting, Richard announced his decision. Valerie was part of his life, of his campaign, and those who couldn't accept that could continue without him. Politics isn't just about reputations or status, it's about serving the people. And if that means I have to let go of those who refuse to accept me and her, then I'll do it. With his declaration, Richard reinforced his commitment not only to Valerie but also to himself. He knew he would face a new level of opposition, but a fire ignited within him indicated he had made the right decision. Meanwhile, Valerie, trusting in the certainty of the feelings between them, began to prepare herself to face the painful chapters ahead. Her love for Richard strengthened her, but her fear of what might happen kept her alert. On a quiet afternoon beside her father, she decided she would not give up easily. She prepared herself for whatever was necessary, ready to fight for what she loved. One night, while reflecting on their respective paths, Valerie and her father enjoyed a silent dinner filled with laughter and the aroma of home-cooked meals. It was at that moment, without prior notice, that Valerie's phone rang. It was an unexpected call, and upon answering, she discovered that a major news channel wanted to air her story. Cameras were rushing to the city, and once again, the attention was centered on her. With a mix of fear and excitement, Valerie decided she would reveal her side of the story to the world, unafraid of what might be said. The narrative she chose to construct was a letter of love and resistance rather than becoming sensationalist gossip. She decided that, at the end of the day, what mattered most was her truth. When the day of the interview arrived, the waiting room was a sea of mixed emotions. Journalists were ready to hear her story, with sharp questions seeking any weakness. With her heart pounding, Valerie sat in front of the camera. As she began to speak, the words flowed. She talked about her love for Richard, the journey of discovery she had experienced by his side, the constant struggle against public opinion, and her intention to challenge the narrative they had tried to impose on her. This is not just a love story but a story of struggle where we decided to be ourselves in a world that tries to separate us, she declared bravely. Valerie's words resonated, and her story touched the hearts of many. What began as a scandal soon transformed into a wave of admiration for her courage and fight. As the interview aired, the weight of the world slowly lifted from her shoulders. The public's response was explosive, and although criticisms continued from the political circle, a new wave of support began to form. Those who had previously doubted were now moved by her authenticity and courage. In the face of adversity, Valerie had decided not just to be an object of scandal but a strong and clear voice. At the end of this chapter of their lives, Richard and Valerie united amid the storm. Together, they began to build a new narrative where love was not what divided them but what gave them strength. As their story unfolded, they understood that the battle for their future had only just begun. Despite the pressure intensifying, each questioning glance no longer felt like an attack but a call to show that their love was a refuge where both could find their place. Once again, they found themselves at the crossroads of politics, ambition, and love, ready to challenge what seemed to be inevitable destruction. The only thing they knew for certain was that, together, they were stronger than any trials life could throw at them. As the love story between Richard and Valerie became the center of conversation in Riverport, the atmosphere grew increasingly electrifying. Public support, generated by Valerie's bravery in sharing her truth, began to take shape as a social phenomenon that surprised even the most astute politicians. Social media exploded with messages of support, while the community, largely composed of people who had experienced similar moments of judgment and condemnation, found resonance in the true love they both represented. Despite the growing popular support, the political elite, the same ones who had viewed Richard and Valerie's relationship with disdain, moved quickly to discredit them. A stream of rumors and slander began to circulate, blaming Richard's relationship for any crisis erupting in the city. Someone in the city council was determined to show that he was a poor leader instead of focusing on the actions that were truly affecting the community. Days and nights of constant strategy meetings, nerves, and uncertainties wore Richard down. Although he was encouraged by the community's growing support, the struggle still seemed endless. On a particularly hectic afternoon, Richard sat with his campaign team in a dimly lit room cluttered with papers and documents. With visibly tired faces, they discussed how to counter the falsehoods. "We need a plan to combat this. We must respond strategically and ensure our campaign stays on track," proposed Jessica, his campaign manager, nervous but determined. "The rumors are out of control," added Thomas, "and we can't allow them to continue damaging our image. We need a cohesive response, one that aligns with the narrative that Valerie and I have created." The tension was palpable as they discussed communication strategies and possible political tactics to safeguard the campaign. What no one expected, however, was Valerie's response. Already empowered by her recent media exposure, she decided she wouldn't just sit by as a spectator. That very night, Valerie dressed resolutely and headed to her father's office at the garage, where she found a spark of inspiration. She didn't want to be a passive victim of circumstances, she thought, but rather the voice that would make true love visible amid the conflict. The next day, she decisively announced that she would confront the city council in an open meeting, allowing the community to ask questions, express their opinions, and refute the insinuations contained in the circulating rumors. "If anyone in the city has doubts about our relationship, they should bring them up in front of everyone. I won't be afraid to talk about what I've experienced and what Richard and I have built together." Determination shone in her eyes as she encouraged everyone at the garage to support her. The news of this meeting quickly flooded social media, and the anticipation for the event grew rapidly. For Richard, the idea of Valerie confronting the council filled him with pride, but his heart wavered at the thought of possible repercussions. Over several days, meetings were held among his team to support Valerie in publicly showcasing their relationship, preempting any attacks that might arise. They prepared for what was to come. Their resilience, their focus, and their love would become a public statement. The day of the meeting finally arrived. The council hall was packed with curious citizens and supporters, all eager to hear what Valerie had to say. The atmosphere buzzed with energy, with anxious murmurs from the crowd. Valerie stepped onto the stage with her head held high, her heart pounding from the pressure she felt but also from the support surrounding her. When Valerie addressed the audience with a firm and clear voice, she began to tell her own story. "I would like to share with you the truth about myself and the man I love," she began, captivating the audience. She spoke about her dreams, her aspirations, and the experience of living such a sincere love in a world that often didn't understand the true value of human connections. "When I hear that my love is questioned for being inferior or unworthy, I wonder, what does true love mean? It shouldn't be a privilege of the few but a universal human experience. In Richard, I've discovered not just a politician but a genuine human being. And as long as we continue to love each other, there will remain that light we can offer not only to each other but to all of you." The passion emanating from Valerie cut through the room, igniting a fire of solidarity among those present. After the meeting, instead of the expected confrontation, community support was overwhelming. Many voices joined the cause, some sharing their own stories about loves that defied social criticism, while others simply applauded Valerie and Richard's courage in the face of adversity. It was a cathartic moment where authenticity had overcome political machinations. Valerie, running toward Richard at the end of her speech, found him in a corner of the hall. "You were incredible," he said, tears of pride in his eyes. They embraced tightly, feeling more united and determined than ever. This event marked a turning point in the public narrative. Now, the voices defending their love began to rise, resonating in Riverport and challenging the dark voices that had tried to destroy their connection. However, not everything would be easy. With popular support, new enemies also began to emerge. Resentful political opponents started devising darker strategies to weaken his campaign. Discreetly, aspects of Richard's past surfaced, situations of corruption, difficult decisions he had made to advance his political career. These were weapons thrown to undermine his image, attempting to divide the support that had begun to strengthen. Richard, feeling cornered, convened his campaign team once more. The atmosphere was tense, the air heavy with concerns over past mistakes, as members discussed the new merciless attack. "We need to divert attention from these rumors, focus on the positive. Every attack that surpasses our dignity must be answered with facts," proposed Jessica, this time clear and determined. Throughout the meeting, they decided to confront these attacks. Instead of hiding behind excuses or denials, Richard and Valerie chose to openly show their true intentions. "We're not perfect, but every decision we make is for the benefit of our community, and I want people to know that," said Richard, concluding a meeting where they finally decided to step forward and face the storm. Election day was only weeks away, and the tension in the city was palpable. Every move had to be methodical and calculated. Valerie would strengthen her role, appearing at events and interviews alongside Richard, defending him and ensuring that the metaphor of love they represented continued to resonate. Days before the election, the energy in Riverport resembled a coiled spring. Valerie and Richard were ready for the challenge, armed with their love and their truth. The real battle was not just for power but for the ability to tell their story, carve out their place in the world, and demonstrate that love knows no bounds. As a culminating confrontation approached, amid the chaos, the spark of their love grew brighter, illuminating a path marked by laughter, tears, and hope. Election day had finally arrived in Riverport, and an air of uncertainty permeated the atmosphere. As the city awakened, lines of voters snaked through the streets, each person eager to support who they believed was the best candidate. Richard and Valerie knew that more than just an election was at stake, it was also the future of their romance in a world that challenged their true love. At every polling station, the image of their love became a symbol of hope. Their story had begun to transcend the initial scandal and was now a topic of discussion among friends, families, and strangers. Richard's campaign team worked tirelessly, ensuring everything was in place. Lights shone brightly, cameras captured every important moment, and the nervousness was palpable in the air. Richard felt as if he were facing the greatest challenge of his life, and his emotions were overflowing inside. Valerie, by his side, tried to contain her own fears while offering the strength she always carried in her heart. The two shared a magical connection. With each glance, they felt the promise of a future together, regardless of what politics might bring. Throughout the day, they visited different parts of the city to stand alongside their supporters and remind them of the importance of their participation. Valerie, with her clear and determined voice, spoke passionately about the change they wanted to see in Riverport. Her words resonated with the audience, delivering a message of unity and hope. People listened to her not just as the young lover of a politician but as a figure who embodied the desire for a better future, one where love and authenticity overcame imposed barriers. Meanwhile, the third candidate, an experienced and cunning politician, began to capture attention with direct attacks on Richard. Knowing his weak points, the opponents started making insinuations about his relationship with Valerie, suggesting it was a distraction rather than effective support. In a live televised debate, he used his intervention time to challenge Richard's merits. How can someone in such an unusual relationship concentrate on the important matters of our city? Upon hearing those words, Richard felt a mixture of frustration and determination. So when it was his turn to respond, he decided this would be a key moment to demonstrate that his love was not a weakness but a source of strength. What I want the people of Riverport to know is that love not only gives meaning to our lives but also drives our actions. My relationship with Valerie is not a hindrance but an inspiration to create a future where authenticity and true passions reign," he expressed fervently, looking at Valerie with great affection. The response resonated in the room, filling it with enthusiastic applause. Media outlets covered the event, and their reports began to accelerate the conversation about how Valerie and Richard's relationship had surpassed expectations. After the debate, the energy between them felt renewed. Somehow, the challenging external environment managed to reinforce the bond they shared. Both realized they were fighting not just for a political victory but for the acceptance of their love in a society that often judged relationships in ways they could never understand. When election night finally arrived, the results began to come in. In the polling station, the pulse of the city was evident. Citizens were on the edge of their seats, awaiting the outcome of their choices. The tension was palpable as minutes turned into hours. Valerie, surrounded by lifelong friends and members of Richard's team, clutched her lucky bracelet as the vote count progressed. Finally, the first projections came to light. On a large screen mounted on the stage of the hall, the numbers began to reveal themselves. The public held their breath, and then explosions of cheers filled the air when it was announced that Richard had secured the majority of votes. Applause resounded, and hugs multiplied in the images on the screen. Valerie, with tears in her eyes, watched Richard step onto the stage, and at that moment, she understood that this triumph was not just his but also theirs. The applause intensified, and the emotion spread like a thread connecting the hearts of those present. With a look that said more than 1,000 words, Richard addressed the crowd. "This is a triumph for all who believe in the power of authenticity, truth, and love. My relationship with Valerie has not been an obstacle but a beacon that has guided our lives to this moment. Together, we will build a future in which every voice is heard and every love is celebrated." Richard's words resonated in the souls of everyone present, and for a brief moment, the outside world faded away. All that mattered was the moment, the victory, the love, and the acknowledgement that they would be together, no matter what. However, the real test was just beginning. As the lights dimmed and the celebration of triumph inevitably became a memory, a central question lingered in Richard and Valerie's minds: what would winning this battle truly mean? That night, as they celebrated with their team and loved ones, Richard allowed himself to be carried away by the moment, embracing the happiness and pride of being elected. But the truth weighed heavily and was reflected on his face when they withdrew from the crowd. The lights went out, but under the calm that settled over the city, Richard and Valerie both knew they would have to deal with the challenges that still remained. In the days following their election victory, with the echo of the results still resonating in their hearts, Richard faced the harsh reality of his new role. Expectations were high, but his connection with Valerie grounded him. Upon learning that their relationship had been under scrutiny even before his victory, Richard felt the need to reaffirm himself in the face of opposition. He decided to organize a press conference that would address both his new political position and the reality of his relationship with Valerie. At that conference, Richard emphasized his commitment to Riverport, while Valerie stood by his side, embodying the strength she had always represented. Together, they spoke about their priorities now that they had the responsibility to lead. Valerie intervened, emotional yet determined. "I am not just his partner, I am also a citizen of this community seeking real changes. We are here to build a future where our struggles are valued and our voices are heard." The room erupted in applause once again, and this time, the reactions were different. Messages of empowerment and shared responsibility began to emerge. For the first time, their story transcended scandal. Their love became the subject of articles, books, and debates. Over the course of the week, their relationship was placed in a broader context, allowing people to understand not only the nature of their love but also the humanity behind them. However, interfering shadows soon became evident. Richard and Valerie's opponents found new ways to undermine their work, gaining access to information that exposed Richard to situations from his past that he hadn't even dared to mention. At first, these were sporadic publications, but soon they swirled into a maelstrom. In a key council meeting where Richard was to present proposals, he realized that what had once created hope was now at risk of destruction. News throughout the state began to insinuate that his relationship with Valerie was the cause of poor decisions and scandals in local government. The pressure was so evident that uttering a single argument became a painful battle. As Valerie and Richard faced divisive politics, dissatisfaction also began to manifest, wearing down the love that had once been their greatest strength. In heated debates, Richard felt deeply frustrated at the idea that their love was, once again, at the center of controversy, beginning to wish that the connection they had cultivated over so many months was not threatened. Valerie, in turn, began to feel ill from the stress, feeling trapped in a victim's role. It was a moment when she proudly defended their love, but at the same time, she began to question what price she would have to pay for being part of a world different from her own. Meeting privately, arguments began to arise between them, each reflecting not only the weight of external expectations but also the fragility of their story. "I didn't want this to become a circus," Valerie complained, trying to process her confusion about what it really meant to be part of the public life Richard had chosen. There was pain in her words, and Richard knew it. "I can't just ignore the consequences of what I've done. My position and the decisions I've made carry much more responsibility than I thought," Richard replied, wishing he could ease her burden but knowing that the situation had affected them in a painful way. For days, they distanced themselves from each other, trapped in their roles of pressure instead of finding each other in the fields of love. Both reflected on who they were now, a politician and a woman who not only loved but also longed for her voice to be heard. Change began to form when, on a particularly quiet afternoon, Valerie sat down to write her thoughts in a journal. A torrent of emotions poured from her pen as she captured how she felt harassed by hate, rumors, and judgments. That writing was liberating. She finally realized that the love she felt for Richard should not be a taboo or a problem but an integral part of who they were as a couple in their quest for truth. That night, after days of silence, Valerie approached Richard, determined to speak without reservations. The room was dimly lit, but the tension was palpable in the air. "We need to stop giving power to all these rumors. Our love is stronger than that, and it can overcome this. We need to learn to talk about this together." The sincerity and clarity of her voice cut through the wounds they had carried for months. In that instant, Richard realized it was time to be authentic. With this new approach, they decided once again to join forces and confront the stigma. Together, they organized a community event to open a dialogue and share their love story more deeply. Short documentaries were made where they shared their visions, providing testimonies about what it was like to love and overcome obstacles in a hostile environment. The event became a platform for an authentic discussion about acceptance, love, and dismantling stigmas. Valerie and Richard felt renewed optimism. By sharing their own story, they seemed to inspire others to be honest about their own experiences. It was a reconciliation not only between them but with the community that had learned to see them not just as a public couple but as individuals facing life between glory and pain. While the consequences of their public appearance began to blossom and their conversations became validated acts within the community, the struggle was not yet over. There was a road ahead, full of tensions and hopes, where true love would challenge politics and its turbulent course, always reminding them that together they were stronger than they imagined. Walking through the streets of Riverport, hand in hand, they began to regain faith in their love and in themselves. Each step they took was a beacon of kindness that illuminated not only their path but also that of those who, like them, were still facing storms. So they sat, prepared, convinced that any battle they faced, they would do it together. In the shadow of the city's bureaucratic tower, where new challenges were brewing, they committed to transforming hate into love, building bridges of understanding in a world that seemed, to individuals still waiting, a great era of hope. The journey of Richard and Valerie had been anything but easy. From a clandestine love marked by controversy to becoming emblematic figures of a paradigm shift in Riverport, their narrative was a testament to the possibility of loving freely in a hostile environment. They had faced rejections, criticisms, and fears, but each challenge had become a stepping stone that brought them closer to each other and to their community. Over time, their joint efforts began to bear fruit. The initiatives that emerged after the community event created a space where people could share their own stories, struggles, and triumphs. In an environment once polarized between political enthusiasts and skeptics, a new dialogue emerged. Embracing diversity in all its forms became a cornerstone of Richard's administration. With Valerie as his right hand, they dedicated themselves to fostering a place where every citizen could feel valued and heard. As the city began to heal the wounds of the past, Richard established programs promoting inclusion and helping to connect citizens from different backgrounds. These were dialogue spaces where the community came together to talk not just about love but also about acceptance, respect, and building genuine connections. Valerie, in her role, became a symbol of the fight for equality, not just as the woman who loved a leader but also as a warrior representing the strength of every person who had felt devalued and forgotten. Richard and Valerie's love had transformed into a beacon of light for others. The city witnessed how their relationship challenged both political structures and social stigma. Gradually, the narrative around them shifted from being the scandal of a politician and the mechanic's daughter to a celebration of love in a world that often chose division. On a particularly beautiful afternoon, Richard decided to organize a massive event in Riverport Central Plaza, where tense dialogues had previously taken place. Colored balloons danced in the wind as people gathered to celebrate diversity and love in all its forms. Richard took the microphone, and before an eager crowd, he dedicated a few words to Valerie. Today we celebrate love in all its forms. Today, as a community, we empower our voices to be heard. Valerie, your strength has guided me and made me a better man. Thank you for being my companion in this struggle and for constantly reminding me of the true value of humanity. Waves of applause broke the air, filling the space with collective recognition for the fight they had shared. Valerie, moved, took the microphone as well. Love shouldn't be a battlefield. We should be free to love, without fear or judgment. We're not heroes, we're people who decided to be brave in a world that often feels so hostile. And each of you can be that change, with your stories, your passions, and indomitable spirits. Their words resonated in the hearts of those present, a people united in a single voice. The celebration exceeded expectations, with the certainty that love had won a decisive battle. Riverport was in the process of healing, and as attendees carried messages of acceptance back to their homes, the city began to bloom with a new vision. Through their experiences, Richard and Valerie had learned that the path to love isn't always easy. However, their story wasn't just theirs, it was a reflection of humanity as a whole. Every obstacle they faced became a lesson that fueled their commitment to themselves and their community. With every step they took together, they felt stronger. The fight for their love had taught them that in the face of adversity, true value lies in being authentic and standing firm. Years after that tumultuous beginning, as Richard looked into Valerie's eyes, he saw more than just love, he saw a companion, a symbol of resilience, and the embodiment of everything they had built together. Over time, Richard continued to lead with the certainty that their love gave meaning to his life, leaving a legacy that would inspire future generations to fight for what they believed in. Valerie, alongside Richard, played a fundamental role in keeping alive the flame of love, acceptance, and diversity. Thus, in the heart of Riverport, with memories of their love written on the streets and a promise of a bright future. Richard and Valerie learned that the true power of their story lay not only in their love but in the strength it provided them to challenge and transform the world around them, creating a home where every heart had a place and a purpose. In the end, the true victory was uniting love and struggle, and their voices echoed through time, enduring forever, reminding us that love always prevails in the heat of the battle between power and passion. If you enjoyed this inspiring story, subscribe to our channel and discover what we have for you and your little ones in the pinned comment below.